You have 1 minute to decide which of the two choices you'll go for. The first choice is to pick an apple from the two I currently have. But beware, one of them is fake, filled with deadly chemicals. You're not allowed to touch, smell, or taste them beforehand. But I can weigh the apples for you at a distance. Whichever you choose though, you must take a bite out of it immediately after I hand it over to you. The second choice is to wait 1 more week. If you wait that long, then you'll be rewarded with 2 fresh apples at the end. None will contain any of those deadly chemicals, and you'll be able to continue drinking water like before. And once you succeed, you can take a bite out of the apples rewarded to you at any time you'd like, but it doesn't need to be immediate. Now, before you say obviously it should be the second choice, let me make this clear that in this particular situation, you have starved for a couple of weeks now, and have been trapped in this room with no way to escape until the end of this ordeal. Now, is the choice easy to make, or has it gotten significantly harder? Which will you choose now? But regardless of your decision, each choice is a reflection of what truth and lies are like to people. In fact, the first choice is a great way to show that lies can be both deadly and harmless. Sure, you might have chosen the harmless one by pure luck in your life so far, but eventually, as time goes by, you'll definitely find yourself standing in front of the apple with the deadly chemicals. Because as the small and big lies continue to pile up, so does the risk of being punished for all of them. Knowing this, it makes me wonder if those who end up choosing the first choice have a low tolerance for pain and an even lower amount of patience. They may indeed be the type who'd rather risk their life than to experience more of the pain that they've already been suffering from. Or perhaps they just don't want to experience that pain at all anymore. They'd rather just end it here without considering anything else. Then does that mean that such people are the only ones who choose to lie? Of course not. But it does make you wonder even more about what Rose from the New Year New Sword event story was thinking. Was she done waiting? Done letting her sister go to her potential death after so many difficult missions? After learning the truth behind their operations? Is that why she lied to Scarlet about her motives? About why she decided to kill the lieutenant and retaliate against the orders given to them by him? Maybe it was because she didn't want to see Scarlet naively agreeing to such a devastating mission, accepting her fate to die, to not be the chosen one, to not have her sister's fate be controlled by the whims of others. Or perhaps because she wanted to test her sister's resolve in protecting humanity in the end. I don't know, and maybe we'll never get a clear answer about this anywhere else in the game. But this incident does show what the most devastating consequence can be for lying. Death. Thankfully, most lies do not result in such tragedy in real life. But even so in the world of Nikke, for Rose, that was her only option, and the only result she herself wanted. The best way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, taking full responsibility for the lies and to reach the ideal result as a solution for the complicated problem she had at hand. But one could ask if she couldn't have died on her own somehow as a way to take on that responsibility. But to Rose, such an ending wouldn't lead to the most ideal situation. Because if she died on her own, it could still potentially cause a lot of problems for Scarlet, who would have survived the rebellion led by Rose. So to create a situation where Scarlet would not be punished for Rose's own wrongdoings, she made her final decision. Her final lie. A lie that was both poisonous and harmless. Harmless towards herself as it meant that she got to fulfill her own desires, to die at the hands of her own sister during a final duel, without being manipulated by others, but poisonous towards her sister as it meant that Scarlet would permanently lose her sister and be alone in this harsh world. And just like what Rose wanted after she forced her sister's sword to pierce through her, Scarlet was spared by the higher-ups. And yet, just like poison, she fell into a state of endless confusion, guilt, and betrayal as she held onto her sister's sword. And once she found out the truth about why her sister did what she did later on, it makes me wonder how much pain she experienced afterwards. how much survivor's guilt she suffered from. If that's why the memories of her sister imprinted onto her mind so deeply, even after experiencing mind switches several times in the past. And if that's one of the main reasons why she acted more like her sister than her younger self as time passed by, especially at the very end of the event story, where she shared a cup of sake with her sister's grave. And yet, there is one more question I can't help but think about. Would things have changed if Rose talked to Scarlet about the truth from the start? Now, before we dig into that, let's first go back to the apple analogy. In particular, about the second choice, the one where you wait one more week in order to get 2 fresh apples. Since the first choice was clearly about lies, we can obviously surmise that the second choice is about the truth. And with that being the case, we can understand that knowing the truth can cause immense suffering at the very beginning. Always a mental struggle to get through. Just like how someone who's already starving can slowly feel themselves going insane while waiting for the week to end. All so that they can escape from the room and finally eat the apples that were promised to them. And as each minute passes by, all you feel is absolute torture. Time's going by too slowly and your impatience continues to grow. But everything feels worth it the moment your teeth sinks into the flesh of the juicy apple. And all of the time you spent going crazy felt worth it in the end, because now your life is saved and you can finally move forward in your life once again. But knowing this, could it be that instead of time being the true healer of all wounds, it's actually the truth that allows you to first step into the path of healing, thus allowing time to finally work its supposed magic in mending your wounds? That the truth is required to heal instead of just time? If that's the case, then returning back to the situation with Rose and Scarlet, if they had communicated with each other from the start about the truth, could their situation have changed? Even a little bit? Perhaps this still wouldn't lead to an ideal situation where both could survive, but at the very least, they could have avoided the so-called poison or sufferings that Scarlet originally experienced. Instead, they could have endured the hardship until they reached their goal, their salvation. Like how the second choice was, with the week-long wait and apple rewards. Of course, Scarlet could have still been in pain one way or the other, even if they shared the truth with each other from the start. But it doesn't mean that it would have all been in vain. After all, hearing the truth from a third party versus hearing the truth directly from the actual person are two very different things, from the levels of impact to the range of influence they can have on another's life. So imagine if Scarlet did hear that whole truth from her sister, instead of from a third party. Then wouldn't her growth and her recovery process differ a lot more from what she actually experienced? Perhaps it could have allowed her to move forward in her life and not be haunted by the ghosts of her past. Not to mention, even if the same fight that resulted in Rose's death were to still occur, I believe that the purpose behind the fight would have slightly changed from the original. No, maybe not slightly. It would have changed significantly. After all, even though the original fight seemed like it was about two ideals clashing on the outside, when we looked into it deeper, there was instead a sense of dissonance between the two. In fact, the fight felt more one-sided, almost aggressive on Rose's end, while Scarlet seemed distracted, perhaps not willing to believe that this was actually happening, and that all of it was only a nightmare. And yet she still became overwhelmed with her desire to prove herself to her sister, answering to her provocations. But if the whole situation was different, then perhaps their fight would have truly become that clash of ideals. It would have truly tested the strength and weight of each person's truth, their resolve, instead of becoming a mere clash between one person's feelings of confusion and betrayal and another person's desire to protect and self-sacrifice. Maybe that's why I saw Scarlet's hesitation as something significant in helping us understand the true meaning behind the fight. In fact, it was never a battle about ideals. Instead, it was only a battle between two different desires. That's why I felt so one-sided with Rose attacking and Scarlet cutting through her, almost as if she was cutting through Rose's lies. But if that's the case, then what would be the main difference between the purpose of the original fight and the purpose behind the battle between their truths? Well, if two truths were to collide, then there would be no lies, no miscommunication, and no misunderstandings between the two. It would just be a matter of persuasion, looking at each other properly and clearly, so that when the battle does end, only grief and firm beliefs will remain. There will be no room for regrets and hesitation at that point, because they have won the battle, and therefore would need to take responsibility for their decisions. And yet that's definitely not the case with the original battle. After all, it was filled with lies, miscommunication, and misunderstandings. It wasn't a matter of persuasion because they never even looked at each other properly and clearly. And that's why when the battle ended, only feelings of betrayal, emptiness, and grief took over. Only regrets and hesitation remained inside of her. Of course, even if we know that, it doesn't mean that battling each other's truths is always an easy thing to do. Especially because telling someone the truth requires a huge amount of courage on your end. Not to mention the fear of rejection, the fear of hurting someone, and the fear of conflict. All of those can truly weigh on you heavily. But even so, we should strive to remember that while such truths and clashes may seem like a bitter pill to take at first, at the very least, it'll eventually melt away in your mouth, forcing you to swallow it one way or another. Which means that the longer you delay, the more the pain and bitterness accumulates for that person, and perhaps even for yourself. Which is why the faster the pill is swallowed, the more time you'll have to heal. And that too would have been the case with Scarlet as well. Because with truth comes pain, and with pain comes growth, and with growth comes the eventual process of moving forward in life. With the passing of time, letting go of what once happened, becoming free from the shackles of the past, taking one step at a time, without looking back, towards those who patiently wait for you, always clinking our sake cups together, a formal toast to the moon and to the future.